Okay, let's keep reading the 13th Reality Journal of Curious Letters.
Wrong.
We're up to the chapter.
Wrong.
What number's that? 34.
Wrong.
The Miracle of Screaming. Please be quiet, mate. Tick took his journal downstairs with him, eager to email Sophia and Paul and let them know he'd finally figured it out. He placed his precious book on the desk and quickly logged in and sent off the messages. His excitement building by the second, he couldn't wait until his dad got home from work so he could tell him too. It's all in place now, he thought. Just 3 days and it's really going to happen. Of course, he didn't know what it was, but that was besides the point. Tick stood up from the computer desk and stretched, suddenly happier than he'd been in weeks. He felt stupid for all the jealous feelings he'd had towards his new friends and the whole thing in general. He'd acted like a little baby, at least within his own mind. But that was all in the past now. 3 days. So bottled up with energy he could hardly stand it. He decided to run over to the library and hang out like he didn't have a care in the world. Maybe he'd check out a book and read it as a reward. He'd probably have just enough time to finish it before the big day came. He told his mum he'd be back in time for dinner and headed out the door. Halfway to the library, the sun finally breaking through the storm clouds that had hung over the world all day, he realised he'd left his journal sitting on the computer desk back home and wondered if he should go back and put it away. No, I won't be gone that long. As he ran on, he hoped he didn't look as ridiculously happy as he felt. Kayla noticed the ugly old book sitting on the computer desk, wondering where it had come from. It looked like something from her favourite Disney cartoon. Maybe it was a book of pirate treasure maps. She was a very young girl, but she knew one thing for certain: pirate treasure maps equal fun. She looked around to make sure no one was around, then grabbed the book from the desk, pulling it down onto her lap as she sat on the floor. Words were written in a little box in the centre of the cover, but she recognised the first one right away. Tick. Uh-oh, she thought. He doesn't like me to mess with his things. Well, just a peek couldn't hurt, could it? She opened the book up and flipped through the pages, seeing lots of pieces of paper that had been glued to the ones already there. No pirate maps, though. Maybe this was an art project her brother had been putting together as a surprise for her. Though it wasn't very pretty, all it had were a bunch of words that looked funny. Kayla quickly grew bored, sad the book didn't have anything to do with pirates. She was flipping through it one last time when the pieces of paper slipped into the air like it had been shot out of a cannon and dropped to the floor in front of her. She picked it up and saw that this one had more words than any of the others, a lot more. The glue must have cracked, letting the boring old paper escape. Well, Kayla thought, now I'm in a pickle. Her mum wouldn't let her use glue without a grown-up around, and if she asked for help, her mum might be mad that she'd broken Tick's book. Plus, she couldn't remember exactly where the piece of paper had been on the inside of the book. Maybe, just maybe, Tick wouldn't notice it was missing since so many other papers were glued throughout, and if she just stuck it somewhere or threw it away, he might find it and then he'd know for sure she'd be messing with his stuff. Kayla put the book back on the desk, then clutched the loose paper in her hands. With devious eyes, she looked over at the fireplace, focusing on the little knob that started up the gas and the flame. It had been a while since she'd had fun with fire. Oops. Tick walked down the road of his neighbourhood, holding the nice thick book he'd checked out at the library. The sun slowly fell toward the horizon, the first glowing fingers of twilight creeping through the trees. Tomorrow was Saturday, and after months and months of thinking and solving and worrying and running, he couldn't wait to spend a couple of days relaxing. On instinct, he checked the mailbox when he got to his house, even though he already knew his mum had got it earlier. Hence the 12th clue. Tick couldn't help but hope that absolutely nothing else happened until Monday night, the big day. He needed a break from all the stress. Easy to say when you have it all figured out, he thought. He'd sure not enjoyed the 3-month-long break he'd had after Christmas. He walked down the driveway towards his front door. Kayla knew she didn't have much time. The warm fire licked the air with an almost silent whooshing sound, reminding her of how much she loved watching things burn. Now that it was mostly warm outside, they never had the flames going, and if her mum walked in, there'd be a certain favourite doll that would get locked away for a whole week. She needed to hurry. She threw the stupid piece of paper into the flames. A wave of ugly black stuff, rimmed with a fiery line of glowing orange, travelled across the paper from both of the short sides as the whole thing slowly curled up into a ball. A little line of smoke escaped into the room, and in a few seconds all that remained was a crispy sheet of ash. "Kayla, what are you doing?" She jumped at her brother's voice, letting out a little shriek as she turned around to see him standing right behind her. Without meaning to, her eyes immediately looked over at the book sitting on the computer desk. Tick followed her gaze, then practically leaped over to grab the book. He flipped it open, his eyes showing he already knew what had happened. His face reddened. His hands began to shake. He almost dropped the book. Then a tear fell out of his right eye. Kayla didn't understand. Why would such a dumb old Tick's shout, full of rage, cut off her thoughts? "Bad girl, Kayla! You are a very bad, naughty, stupid, naughty girl!" Then he ran out of the room and out of the front door, slamming it closed behind him. Kayla bawled. Tick ran, clutching the journal in both arms. He didn't know where he was going or how long it would last, but all he could do was run, his loosened scarf flapping in the wind. His heart wanted to explode out of his chest. Panic and anger and disappointment crushing his feelings, like someone had injected a full-sized elephant into his bloodstream. It hurt, and tears flowed down his face as he pounded the pavement with his clumsy feet. He fell twice, only to get up and keep running. How could Kayla have done something so stupid? Everything had just fallen into place. Everything was perfect. But now the message had been sent. Tick didn't know how, but he knew it had been sent. Burn the letter, stop the madness. Tick had been cut off. Even though he'd figured out all the clues and was ready to perform the silly ritual in 3 days, he'd been cut off. Somehow Master George would know the first letter had been burned, which meant he'd think Tick had given up and was out of the game. After everything, after all the work and sweat and danger, it was all over. Tick was in the forest now, still running, dodging trees and brush, tripping and getting back up again, ignoring the scratches. He sucked at the air around him, forcing it into his lungs so his heart wouldn't give up and die. But then it finally became too much. He stopped, doubling over to take in huge gulping breaths. Sunset had arrived and the woods had grown very dark, the trees standing as monuments of shadows all around him. When he finally caught his breath, he straightened and folded his arms around the journal of curious letters. There had to be a way to fix this. There had to be. Tick knew that Master George somehow tracked what all of his subjects were doing. Tick didn't know what kind of magic or futuristic device accomplished the task, but he knew his actions had been monitored. How else did Mothball and Rutger always know where and how to find him, even in Alaska? Based on what Paul had said, they went there to give him a clue, not the other way around. Surely Master George cared more about Tick's intent than the mistake of Kayla burning the letter, and Tick's intent was stronger than anything he had felt in his entire life. He wanted to see this through. He wanted to reach the end of the mystery. He wanted it very, very badly. Not sure if he'd finally flipped his lid once and for all, Tick screamed at the top of his lungs, belting out several words as loudly as his body could handle. "Master George, I didn't burn the letter!" It hurt his throat and made him cough, but he shouted it a second time anyway. Drawing in a deep breath through his torn throat, Tick concentrated. He had to do something. He had made his choice long ago not to burn the letter. That choice still had to mean something, didn't it? If only he had chosen to take his journal with him to the library instead of leaving it where Kayla could find it. He felt a funny tickle growing in the pit of his stomach. A reserve of energy he hadn't known was there. A wave of warmth spread up from his stomach into his chest. The air in the woods stilled around him, as if the whole world hushed, waiting for him to make his move. Tick gritted his teeth. He tapped into that quiet pool of energy, channeling the heat that filled his body and forcing it through his shredded voice box, yelling out for the third time, "Master George, I did not burn the letter. The woods swallowed up his words, returning only silence. The fire in his belly flickered, then went out, leaving Tick feeling weak and shaky. He waited, hoping he would see some kind of sign that Master George had heard him. Nothing. Dejected, throat burning, and not knowing what else he could possibly do, not knowing if what he had done had changed anything at all, he headed for home. Kayla sat in the middle of the living room, hosting a tea party for her 3 favourite dolls, humming to herself. She passed out cups of steaming hot tea. The front door swung open, followed by her very sad-looking brother. His clothes looked dirty, his hair was all messed up, and he was sweating. What happened to him? She wondered. He was supposed to be at the library. He came into the living room and knelt down beside her, pulling her into a fiercely tight hug. Kayla thought Tick was acting weirdly, but she finally squeezed back, wondering if he was okay. I'm sorry, Kayla. I'm really, really sorry I yelled at you like that. He leaned back from her. His eyes were all wet. You're a good girl, you know that. Come here. He hugged her again, then stood up and headed for the stairs. His head hung low, that strange-looking book with his name on the cover gripped in his right hand. Halfway up the stairs, he leaned over the railing and repeated to himself, You're a good girl, Kayla. I'm sorry I yelled at you, okay? I didn't know I know you didn't mean to mess with my book. Kayla was confused. When had Tick yelled at her? Earlier, he'd been talking to his friends on the computer while she was playing with her dolls, but he hadn't said anything to her. She hadn't touched his book at all. How could she? He had taken it with him when he left for the library. She and her dollies laughed at the silliness of boys, and she poured herself another cup of invisible tea. Tick flopped down on his bed with a groan. How could he know if screaming in the woods had done any good? Was he really going to have to agonize all weekend, waiting, then head to the cemetery on Monday night and hope for the best? Was it really all over? With a heavy heart, he opened up his journal of curious letters to torture himself by studying the spot where Master George's first letter had once been glued. Safe and sound. When the front cover flipped over and he fell into his lap, Tick looked at something he couldn't understand. He stared for a very long time at the page before him, his mind shifting into overdrive, trying to comprehend the message his eyes were frantically sending down the nerve wires to his brain. A message that was impossible. The first letter was there, glued to the page like it had always been. Not a burn mark or blemish to be found. It was there. How? Master George or someone had just pulled off the coolest magic trick Tick had ever seen. Kayla had just poured the last cup when she heard loud thumps from upstairs. Was somebody jumping up there? Followed by happy screams of joy. It was Tick. He sounded like he just received a personal letter from Santa Claus. What a weirdo, she thought, taking a sip of her tea. Far away, Master George sat upright in his ergonomic chair, staring at the flashing lights of his command centre. He shook his head, feeling a bit dazed. He'd just been readying himself to do something. He couldn't remember what exactly. He'd been thinking about Atticus Higginbottom, but why? It was as if a bubble in his brain had popped, taking the last few minutes of his life with it. It was downright maddening. He couldn't remember anything. Why was he even sitting in the chair? He only sat here when someone had made a pick or if someone had burned their letter. He shook his head. Had someone burned their letter? Had Atticus burned his letter? He looked at the computer screen, counting the purple check marks. No, everyone was accounted for. The mark by Atticus's name glowing brightly and steadily. That was good. The special day was coming up quickly, and Master George couldn't afford to lose a single member of the group, especially not Atticus. I really must be getting old. Bewildered, he stood up, calling for muffin tops and thinking how much he'd like a nice pot of peppermint tea. Chapter 35. The Final Preparation. By Sunday night, Tick had heard back from Paul and Sophia about the strange incident with the burned letter and its miraculous reappearance. They were as shocked and clueless as he was about how or why it had happened. Paul wasn't shy about expressing his doubt that it had occurred at all. His theory was Tick had been so stressed out about the magic words that he'd experienced one whooper of a bizarre dream. But Tick knew it was real. He'd even asked Kayla about it, and she didn't remember anything about burning the letter. No, Tick knew something magical had happened. Something supernatural, something miraculous, and he couldn't wait to ask Master George what it might mean. He sat at the desk in his room waiting for his dad. The lamp on the desk provided the only light, failing miserably to push back the gloom. They'd planned all weekend to meet at 8 o'clock Sunday evening to discuss the big day and to run through the clues one final time. Though they didn't really know what they were planning for, it seemed they'd only have one shot at this, or rather, Tick would only have one shot. The clues had been very clear. He must go alone, unless his dad wanted to drop dead of a heart attack right before the special time. Tick had just pulled out the Journal of Curious Letters when he heard a soft knock at the door. "Come in," he called out. His dad opened the door and shut it behind him. 25 hours to go, kiddo." Tick groaned. "I know. I've been dying for this day to come, and now it's here. I wish we had a week or two more. I'm scared to death." "Well, at least you're honest." Dad came in and sat on the bed, ignoring the loud creak of the bed springs, which sounded as if they were about to break. Most kids would act tough and say they weren't scared at all. Then most kids would be faking it. His dad clapped his hands together. "Well, we won't have much time to talk tomorrow night before you go, so let's run through everything." Tick wasn't ready for that yet. "Dad?" "Yeah?" "What if whatever I do takes me somewhere? Something tells me it will. What if I'm gone a long time?" His dad's face melted into a look of deep sadness and droopy eyes and frowns. "Professor, trust me, I've been so worried about all this, I can't sleep at night. How could any good father let his son go off to who knows where and do who knows what for who knows how long, especially after the dangerous things we've been through?" He paused, rubbing his hands together. "But what can I say? I'm nuts. It's hard to believe in all this, but I believe in you. I'm taking a huge leap of faith, but I'm going to let you walk out of this house and down that road." He pointed out the window, "and off to wherever or whatever it is you've been called to do. It's going to kill me, but I'm going to do it. I'm either the best or the worst dad in history." A long silence followed. Tick felt something stir within him, a new appreciation for his parents and what they went through worrying about their kids. It couldn't be easy, and now Tick was going to do the worst thing possible to his dad, make him let him go without having a clue what might happen to his only son. "What about Mum?" Tick finally asked. His dad looked up from the spot he'd been staring on the floor. "Now that could be a battle. What are you going to do? She'd never let me go." His dad laughed. "That's exactly why you're going to go tomorrow night and leave the explaining to Mum bit to me. Once you're gone, I'll sit her down and spill the beans, every little morsel, from beginning to end. Your mum and I have loved each other for many years, son, and eventually she'll understand why you're doing this, and why you and I feel so strongly about it." Tick snorted. "Yeah, sometime after she tries to kill you for letting me go." His dad nodded. "You're probably right there. Just try not to be gone too long, and maybe I'll survive." Tick suddenly had a horrible thought. What if I never? His dad held up a hand and shushed Tick loudly. Stop, Atticus." "But, no," he shook his head vigorously. "You're coming back to me, you hear? These people know what they're doing, and you will come back to me, and there won't be another word said about it. Is that understood?" Tick couldn't remember the last time his dad had looked so stern. "Yes, sir." "Good. Now let's run through those clues." It took half an hour, but they read through each and every one of the 12 clues, studying their words one last time to make sure they hadn't missed anything. But it all seemed to be there, straightforward and solved. Looking back, it had all been pretty easy in a way. The real test seemed to be the endurance and the bravery to keep going. And of course, figuring out the magic words, which seemed to be the most important piece of the puzzle. No matter what else he'd done, without those words to say, he felt sure everything would fail. When they read the 12th clue, they realised they'd perhaps missed something. A little phrase their mysterious friend had thrown in to verify they'd decoded the magic words correctly. Listen to the words of Master George. They've been there all along, and they really had been there. If Tick had just known to look at the first letter of the individual clues, he'd probably figured out Master George the second they'd learned the name from Norbert up in Alaska. And so, after thoroughly examining the entire journal of curious letters with his dad, Tick felt ready to go. Tomorrow night, in the cemetery, close to downtown at 9 o'clock, he'd show up, alone in warm clothing, and say the words Master George with his eyes closed, hands in his pockets, then stomp the ground with his right foot 10 times. After that, who knew what might happen? Tick went downstairs to check his email before bed, realising this might be the last chance he had to see if his friends had sent anything. It was already approaching early morning for Monday for Sophia because of the time difference, and Paul was probably already in bed. What would happen to the others between their turns and his? If they were being taken somewhere, would they just wait around all day until he arrived? Was the staggered time difference on purpose, so Master George wouldn't have to do whatever he was going to do to everyone all at once? There I go again, Tick thought, asking a billion questions even though he knew the answer was out of his reach for now. One more day, 24 hours, then hopefully he'd know everything at last. He logged into his email and was excited to see messages from both Sophia and Paul. He opened Sophia's, who'd sent hers hours before Paul. Tick and Paul. Not much to say now, huh? Don't think Sophia Pacini is in love with two American boys, but I really hope I see you both tomorrow. I'm sure somehow they're going to bring us magically together, right? Good luck. I wish we knew what to expect. Ciao. Sophia. For some reason, Tick felt a pang of sadness in his heart, realising the possibility he might never hear from Sophia again. What if something terrible happened tomorrow? What if only some of the people who performed the ritual made it to wherever they were going? Tick told himself to shut up and clicked on Paul's email. Hey, little buddies. Hot diggity dog. Tomorrow's the day. Let's don't jinx anything. Hope you're right about us meeting. If so, see you tomorrow. Out, Paul. Tick hit reply to all and typed a quick message, knowing his friends might not see it anyway. Paul and Sophia. Good luck tomorrow. See you soon, I hope. Tick. He turned off the computer and stood up, looking over at the fireplace. He thought back to the two events that had happened in the last few months related to the pile of stacked brick, now cold and dark. First, the commitment he'd made not to burn the first letter, to stay in the game, made while kneeling before a fire that could have ended it all, and then the bizarre incident with Kayla in the letter. Something that either proved miracles really did happen or Tick had serious mental issues. With a swarm of butterflies in his belly, Tick finally turned out the lights and headed up the stairs to his room, ready for one last night before the big day he'd been preparing for since November. It took him over 2 hours to fall asleep.